Okay, sorry for the video problem. Back to where we were at yesterday. So, as I mentioned before, this this text, what has happened here, this text has been drawn out to correspond with when the text mentions Yahweh as the name for God. And what you will see as we read through this, what you will see is that this is a free, full standing, independent narrative of the flood. So we asked some of those questions. What was the reason for the flood? Wickedness, evil. It's for Yahweh. That's why Yahweh brought the flood. Yahweh was sorry. Yahweh has some emotions here. It grieved him to his heart. Emotion. Remember, Yahweh in Genesis 2 is down and dirty with the earth. And if we didn't spend time talking about the Garden of Eden, but if you notice, Yahweh is very emotional in that story as well. So Yahweh says, I'm going to blot out from the earth the human beings I've created. But Noah found favor in the sight of Yahweh. Then Yahweh said to Noah, go into the ark, all of your household, for I have seen that you alone are righteous before me in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals. There we go. The male and its mate, and a pair of the animals that are not clean. So according to Yahweh, we need cleanliness is important, these clean animals. And then a pair of the unclean animals. 7 pairs of birds. Apparently birds are clean animals. Male and female, to keep their kind alive on the face of all the earth. For in 7 days I will send rain for 40 days and 40 nights. That's key for the Yahwist here, for the author who refers to God as Yahweh. 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing I've made I will blot out. And so Noah did all that Yahweh had commanded him, and Noah with his sons and his wives went into the ark to escape the waters of the flood. They went in. The Yahweh story, they went in. And then, very neatly, the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. The flood continued for 40 days on earth, and the waters increased, bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. Everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. Again, there's this suscitation, this breath of life, recalling Genesis 2, when Yahweh is down in the dirt creating things. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent out the raven. It went to and fro until the waters dried up. And then he sent out the dove to see if the waters had subsided from the earth. But the dove found no place, and it returned to the ark, for the waters were still. So the raven was no good because it just flew around. But the dove's going to come back. So he put his hand out, took it in the ark. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent out the dove. And the dove came back in the evening, and there was an olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided. Then he waited another 7 days, sent out the dove, and didn't come back anymore. Then Noah built an altar to Yahweh. He took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when Yahweh, this is an interesting passage. When Yahweh smelled the pleasing odor, Yahweh said in his heart, man, he's up there. It smells good. Or maybe he's walking around the garden, right? He's down, he can smell it. I will never curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of human heart is evil from youth. Nor will I ever destroy every living creature as I've done. So here's a covenant, right? As long as the earth endures, seed time, harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter shall not cease. So you're like, well, but there's no building of the ark. Well, but there is a complete story. There's a complete story here. So if we go on and we go to the next, now what this story does is it takes a look at every time the text mentions Elohim. And so the author mentioned Elohim for God. And so, beginning in 6:5, where we took over. And here we see, here's one of our questions. Again, we saw the flood was 40 days on the other one. And in this one, the earth was corrupt. So that was one of our questions. What was the reason for, what was the reason for the flood? And what is Elohim or Yahweh's reason? Well, Elohim's reason is corruption. And Elohim saw the earth was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its ways upon the earth. That's really big when you start thinking about the prophets and how they really focus in on corruption later in the Bible. And Elohim said to Noah, I've decided to make an end of all flesh. It's filled with violence too. There's violence and corruption. I'm going to destroy them. Make yourself an ark. So here it lays out the details for the ark, right? And then this is interesting. And this is a very important point. Of every living thing of all flesh, you will bring 2 of every kind into the ark to keep them alive with you. If you were really stumbling on how many animals were in there, that's a good place to stumble because it's not clear. It's not clear. Elohim says 2 of every kind. They shall be male and female. So Elohim doesn't care about clean, unclean. Of the birds according to their kinds, of every creeping thing, 2 of every kind. Also take with you the kind of food is eaten, store it up, and it shall serve food for you and them. And then Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters came on the earth, of clean and animals that are not clean, and so that's interesting that Elohim even mentions of clean and of animals that are not clean, and of everything that creeps on the ground. 2 and 2, male and female, went into the ark. There's a different number depending on what the name for Yahweh or God is. Went into the ark with Noah, and as Elohim had commanded Noah, after 7 days of floods and I probably duplicated that. In the 600th year of Noah's life, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. That's interesting. That's how the flood, look here, the rain fell. The rain fell according to Yahweh. Remember the Yahweh story in Genesis 2. God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, so this river would come up. This image of water is much different. It's much different. Rain fell according to the Yahwist. According to the Elohist, it's an undoing of creation, because here comes the tohu vabohu back. The great deep burst forth, and the heavens and the dome in the heavens, they were opened. It's this return. It's undoing of creation in the Genesis 1 story. So Elohim, Genesis 1 refers to God as Elohim. This part of the flood story refers to God as Elohim. It is tohu vabohu. It is recalling that which was created. It's undoing creation. Then every wild animal of every kind, everything that creeps, every winged creature, they went into the ark with Noah. And so, how many times did they go in the ark? That should have been another question, because they went into the ark in the other story too. There they go. Noah and his sons, his wives went into the ark. Okay, well, here we go again. The very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's wife, 3 wives, sons entered the ark. They entered the ark twice because these are separate stories. They sit independently. That is big news. That is huge news. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to get to the end of this, and I'll tell you why. Every wild animal, all those entered, male and female. How many times did they have to go in the ark? They went into Noah, and Elohim was even recalling the number because the number was important. 2 and 2 of all flesh. What happened to 7? What happened to 7? With the 7 animals, 7 clean animals. Elohist is not important for that story. The waters swelled, not the rain fell, the water swelled and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the waters. Ark's on this tohu vabohu. The water swelled so mightily that the mountains were underneath. And all flesh died. And the numbers are important here to the Elohist. Blotted out every living thing. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. And how long's the flood? The waters swelled for 150 days. The length of flood for the Elohist is 150 days, which stands in contrast to 40 days, which is what, our Sunday school, right? The nice 40 number there. It's 150 days. So what is that? 150 is over 5 months. But Noah remembered God. God remembered, Elohim remembered Noah and all the wild animals. And Elohim made a wind blow over the earth. And the fountains of the deep, there it is, tohu vabohu, were closed after 150 days. The rain abated. Okay, so yeah, that needs to go in the other story. And in the 7th month, the 17th month of the ark, there came the rest of the mountains of Ararat. The waters continued to abate until the 10th month. This is a long flood story for the Elohist, right? The 2nd month, then God said to Noah, get out of the ark, you and your wife, bring out all living flesh. And this is a long story, so I didn't put the covenant. But there's a different covenant as well, according to the Elohists. There's some differences here, and they exist by themselves, independent of each other. These stories can sit side by side. And so this is well, these are doublets. They're just they're doing it for the author is doing it for literary intent. Let's keep that in mind, and let's weigh the evidence. Okay, let's weigh the evidence. So here are the differences in the which is what I'm referring to. The Yahwist version is God referred to as Yahweh and Elohim. That's the primary indicator that you're dealing with different content. When Yahweh is mentioned, God is emotional. When Elohim is mentioned, we're interested in generations, each according to its kind, and the numbers and how big the ark is, and the year, when Moses was born and was alive. The big giveaway here is the number of animals, because the person who mentions Elohim for God, it's clear, it's 2 by 2. It's consistent throughout. The Yahwist is consistent too. Once 7 of unclean, 7 pairs of unclean animals. That's a lot of animals, right? And we've got a 40-day. I wonder what the museum in Kentucky. I wonder what they do with this. Then we have the 40-day flood here versus a 150-day flood, and it's very clean. It's a very clean read. Each one of these is a very clean read when you set them apart from each other. To me, that's the biggest piece of evidence. These are separate stories woven together by a later editor, by a redactor. That is, and again, here we go. Tohu vabohu matches Genesis 1, and then rainstorm matches Genesis 2. It's abundantly clear. And so I'm gonna stop sharing here, and I'm gonna start sharing some resources. This is actually called something called the document hypothesis. It was discovered. Oh gosh, it's been around for a while. It's Jean Estruc, a French person, actually started writing about this in the 1800s, noticing that okay, the common notion back then was that Moses wrote the first 5 books. And so Jean Estruc was struck, because he's studying this and he's noticing these inconsistencies, and these continue. There are duplicated stories throughout Genesis, and so it's clear. It becomes clear that there are multiple authors, and that's a huge blow to tradition. That's something that sits. Okay, well, that's not what I was taught. Well, that's not what we've been learned to just take things on faith and what we've been told, and we haven't taken time to look. Who here has taken time to look at that? I know I didn't until I was 18 in class. there's the document hypothesis is what it's called. It's not really a hypothesis. Um, it's accepted in literary scholarship. It's just accepted. If you're part of a tradition that doesn't accept that, I would ask you to really fundamentally go search the evidence and see what's out there, and compare, and you will find people making very what do you call it? When somebody mental gymnastics. People are making some very contorted arguments to try to explain away, why these you know characteristics of the text exist. Uh, so that was then Jonah. I mentioned Jonah Strook, who didn't publish any of his work because he was scared. Because he was scared, this will bring reproach upon me, because the church is going to think I'm a blasphemer, I'm a heretic, so that wasn't published during Jonah Strook's life. Another person that picked this up was Julius Wellhausen. And so Julius Wellhausen had some flaws in the argument, but not many. For the most part, scholarship over the past 120, 130 years has accepted this. I would say this is the best argument that's kind of modernized that it's not really a debate. It just is. I mean, and so Joel Baden, this is actually, I think, part of his dissertation. Um, he comes off, I've watched him, you can find him on YouTube. If I could have done anything with my life, with my scholarship, it would have probably been emulated his track and path, and the amount of time and effort he put into this, as far as the argument really establishing, beyond a reasonable doubt, that this is really the characteristics of Genesis and the early Bible is just multiple authorship, and you've had a later redactor come back and weave these stories together. Now, that's such a threat. It's my faith. What are you talking about? So they're just, what are you telling me? They're just stories? Before I go on too long, I want to pose this question, because the way that we keep records today with our smartphones, and we video things, and we have verbatim, we can go back and read somebody in quotes and just know it for a fact. Information was passed along in much different ways. As I mentioned in a previous video, most of these appear to be oral stories carried by culture and then written down at a later date. One of the early hypotheses here was that you had somebody, a Yahwist in the southern kingdom, and the priestly writers in the northern kingdom, or vice versa. And so you kind of have this, when Judah was split into Israel and Judah. So you kind of have these two authorship, and so later somebody's getting together and trying to weave them together. I would say there's overwhelmingly strong evidence for an argument that somebody is weaving things together later, and that's really throughout the Bible, and that even exists in the New Testament. And so I would stop you here before you like throw me under the bus and want to, like the people didn't publish their works on this because it was so threatening. I would say, even back then, how many people actually read? How many people actually were able to study ancient languages and go look? So, and there's been a reaction in religion over and against this information. The whole fundamentalist movement, which began in the early part of the 20th century, is a reaction against this. That you can read it. It's very clearly a reaction against higher scholarship, higher literary scholar and critique. They didn't believe it should be critiqued at all. I would argue this: an unexamined faith, a faith that will not stand up to reason or critique, is an insufficient faith. I would strongly, I can't claim authorship. That's from one of my professors, Dr. Joseph Bessler, but I I completely wholeheartedly believe that. I mean, you have to have, if you're on a castle and it's built on sand, the castle is going to crumble down. And the logic must follow for you to have true faith and belief in something. And so what I'm going to posit here for us, for our 21st century minds, Does something have to be factual? This is the question for you for next time. Does something have to be factual to be true? Keep that in mind in our post-truth society.